Here we go. All right. Well, hi, everyone. Welcome to this very exciting expert session. I love this topic because everyone is interested in it, and it doesn't matter what vertical you're in. It doesn't matter whether you're a consultant or an advisor or you own a firm. Everyone has an opportunity to tap into this revenue stream of corporate speaking, paid corporate speaking, I should say. Everyone has this opportunity, no matter what business you're in, because all of you are experts in what you do. And funny enough, I never even looked at myself as someone who could make money off of this because I'm so focused on all of you. And an opportunity had fallen in my lap recently, and I was like, I could do that. Okay. And what do you know? I got paid to speak too. I mean, I always thought, oh, who's going to bring in Aaron Halper to tell all their employees to leave and start consulting businesses? But that clearly was not what it was all about. It was more of a corporate training. And so it just goes to show even I could do it. So everybody can do it. And it's a really exciting revenue stream. And Jen Cassetta, I mean, I'm going to read her bio for you because there is a reason why she is hosting this event. We asked her to do this and she generously said yes. So I appreciate that, Jen. Let me go ahead and read her bio. So this event is called How to Land Corporate Speaking Contracts Consistently. So let me tell you about Jennifer. Based in Los Angeles, Jennifer Cassetta is a nationally recognized speaker, empowerment coach, and self-defense expert. She has worked with tens of thousands of professional women around the country to help them unleash their inner badass. Equipped with her 3rd degree black belt in Hapkido, master's degree in nutrition, and NLP and health coaching certifications, she develops programming that helps women feel strong, safe, and powerful from the streets to the boardroom. With clients that include Apple, Ace Hotels, American Airlines, British Airways, Bacardi, Del Monte, Hyatt, NASDAQ, Nike, Uber, and UBS, Jennifer has rocked hundreds of stages across the country with her superpower combination of engaging content and contagious enthusiasm. Her skills have been featured on The Today Show, The Doctors, Rachael Ray, Inside Edition, E!, The Real, Bethany, when she had a show, and Marie Osmond's talk show, as well as countless news networks. Her expertise has been included in Women's Health, Shape, Huffington Post, Wall Street Journal, and more. In 2016, she was a featured expert on ABC TV's My Diet is Better Than Yours. Her new book, sneak peek here, her new book, The Art of Badassery, Unleash Your Mojo with Wisdom from the Dojo, will be found on bookshelves everywhere in August of 2022. And I have an uncorrected reader's copy that I am flying through, super, super excited. Jen, thank you for being here. Thank you for sending me this amazing book. One other little tidbit I'll share. And when you read her book one day, you'll see the connection. But I interviewed Jen on our LinkedIn Live show, The Upside of Work, a while ago, and she was talking about, well, I won't give away the story, but she was talking about how she fell in love with martial arts and the dojo and how comfortable she felt there. A couple weeks later, I saw a sign in a storefront window near my town that said, you know, Tiger Schulman opening soon. And I thought, you know, I hate working out. I'm going to try this. And it was only because of Jen that I did that. And I fell in love. And I am like a scrappy, scrawny, but like I am like in it. And I am dripping in sweat and I'm obsessed with it. I love the culture. I love the community. I love the workout. I'm like in love. And it truly is because of Jen. So Jen has impacted me in such a big way, but we are not here to talk about Tiger Schulman or my boxing passion. We are here to talk about corporate speaking and how to land those gigs consistently. So first and foremost, I just want to say thank you, Jen, for being here. Sometimes I forget to thank our host because I'm so excited. So thank you. Thank you for being here.
No, thank you guys. I'm so excited. This is like, I've been looking forward to this all week and my heart is like pitter pattering right now, which is weird for me. So that just means it's important.
Yeah, so she speaks on TV, she speaks on stages with like thousands of people, but it's just you and me here, and she's nervous. So this is exciting, and it's high impact because everyone wants to know how you do it. And so that's what we're going to get to. I want to say also that Jen and I have planned some time for Q&As at the end. So as you have questions, paste them in the chat the upside way with a letter Q to start, so that Monique knows it's a question and not chatter. And Monique is going to place your question in this document that we have open. And at the end, we're going to go through questions. All right. And just to let you know the outline of what we're going to talk about today, the general outline. First, we're going to talk about how do you get these gigs. Then we're going to talk about pricing. And then we're going to talk about structuring the keynote. All right. So, and there's a lot of little subtopics below all those, but that's the order. So let's just dive in and just get right to it. How do you get these gigs, Jen?
Great question. Yeah, there's no secret to it. The secret or the key is outreach, 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 constant. And just so everyone knows, over 90% of my income comes from speaking gigs. So like the rules that I have for accepting gigs and pricing them, all that might be different depending on what your goals are. But for me, it's to earn a living. So last year, last year was my biggest income year ever in a pandemic, mostly from virtual speaking, which blew my mind. So I went through to prepare for this, I looked at, I have a Google sheet that has all of my booked events, how much, this, that, like everything in there. So I went through and I just made like a very informal sheet to see where all those gigs came from. So I kind of put buckets together. And the first bucket is just referrals from networking, right? Either LinkedIn or personal outreach. 13 of those came from saw me speaking on a stage. 20 of them came from cold outreach. A couple of them came from someone that had hired me to speak and then moved companies a couple of years later and then brought me back to their new company. SEO, meaning they found me from an online article or saw me on something. And then third party. So that just means, especially for, well, it's really just for my self-defense session. And again, I know this is titled keynote, and I just feel like the lines are a little blurred these days with virtual speaking, like keynote versus workshop versus presentation, whatever. I just put it all in speaking because I'm getting paid to do it. So my self-defense session, which is mostly speaking before we even get to any physical stuff, there's a third party, like I don't even know what to call them, but they essentially book people like me to come into their clients to teach.
Like
and it's usually
bureau?
Say it again.
Like a speaker bureau?
It's not a speaker's bureau. It's really for wellness stuff. So they bring in like meditation teachers, mindfulness teachers, yoga teachers, all of that stuff. So for very long, and just to a little more insight, for a long time, I was trying to separate myself from that world, especially for the self-defense, because I wanted to be a keynote speaker on safety and self-defense versus someone who can come in for, a very low paying yoga class or something like that. So I did separate myself, but in the last year with the pandemic, I made a deal with a certain third-party company to raise my rate way more than anyone else was getting paid to deliver these safety sessions because of the zeitgeist that was going on.
Amazing. So your biggest bucket of how you got the gigs was what? Or your biggest two?
20 was cold outreach. So 20 out of last year I did 54 speaking events with 44 clients. So some were obviously repeat, and I would love that number to be higher, get the repeats higher, of course, I'm working on that. But 20 of them was cold outreach. So that even surprised me.
Yeah, so what are you saying when you're reaching out cold to people? Like, what is the approach?
Okay, good question. It's usually on LinkedIn. If I can get an email, even better. And it would be just to introduce myself and hopefully solve a problem that they're having. So if it's to my main buckets of the people that I would reach out to are HR, chief people, chief corporate culture, that kind of stuff, or women's ERGs, which is really hard to find if you don't have a connection to someone in the company. It's very rare that you can find who's in charge of the ERGs. Does everyone know what an ERG is? Should I explain?
Why don't you just explain?
Okay.
In case people don't.
Sure thing. Employee resource group are these groups, and some companies call them different things depending on, but that's the majority. And it'll be like women of Nike, AAPI of Nike, all the different types of people joining together that want to support each other. So finding your niche ERG would be a really, really good idea. So for me, obviously it's women's ERG, but again, it's difficult to find unless you have an in the organization. So if you have a friend that works there or any connection, I would reach out to them and say, hey, do you know who's in charge of the ERGs? Because it's not a paid position. People, they volunteer to run these ERGs within the organization. So it's unpaid labor, but most people that do it.
Jen and I ranted for about 30 minutes on this topic alone as we prep for this session. I was like, okay, we have to stop talking about how troubling that is in the first place. But
right.
Okay. And so cold outreach, what are the top 2 or 3 keynotes that you've been hired for? Like what are the titles of what people are bringing you in for?
By far the 2 most popular, I really only have 3, but the 2 most popular are The Art of Badassery, which is the book, and I'll explain how it if you want me to, and Personal Safety and Self-Defense / it could be called She Warrior Self-Defense / whatever, sometimes I just have to change the name depending on who I'm speaking to. Because some women's ERGs are like, yeah, She Warrior. And some are like, no, we want to invite everyone, want to make sure it's inclusive. So I just make it very generic, personal safety and self-defense. So did I just answer the question?
Yeah, I just want people to know, like, it's a very, like,
oh yeah,
all your speaking topics, they have a defined title.
Oh yes, and the third is
a product.
Yes, the third is From Burnout to Badass, and actually that's becoming a little more popular. I developed that ages before pandemic, and now obviously burnout is a hot topic. So again, that is another thing. If your topic, if what you're speaking on is just like in the zeitgeist of the moment, whoa, be prepared for a floodgate. That's what happened with safety and self-defense over the pandemic. I've been pushing self-defense down people's throats for 20 years and no one cared. Nobody. It was like a struggle. And I've been for years thinking, I don't want to teach this anymore. I'm sick of it. I'm sick of trying to get people to understand that self-defense is important. So then all of a sudden, people are scared. And as like, obviously I'm sad about that, but I'm glad that I'm in the right place at the right time and prepared. And I've now given that talk so many times that it's just like, boom, natural, because like it's just in my psyche now.
So is the problem you're solving as you're reaching out, doing cold outreach, is the problem you're solving, hey, your employees are coming back to work and they're scared that, they're fearful of their safety for all different reasons as they make their way back to the office, and I'm here to solve that. And like, is that the problem you're solving?
100%. And I'm getting way more incoming leads because of that. So people are saying to their HR person, like, hey, you're making us come back to the office. I live in New York City. I'm scared to take the subway. All that kind of stuff is happening. So they're now seeking out self-defense and safety training.
Listen, I am not going to lie to people. When I am punching that bag and sweating my butt off, I am envisioning being on the subway and some lunatic attacking someone. And I have always thought, what would I do in that situation? And now I'm like, I feel like I know. I'm going to do a cross jab, and I'm going to do a front kick, and I'm going to, protect this person, hopefully.
And
So,
doesn't it feel empowering to know that you have something in your tool belt versus just
to
like
know that I can throw a punch
Mhm.
For the first time in my life, yes, it is empowering, and for sure. So just to be clear, when you are reaching out, when you're doing that cold outreach, it's not like you saw the person talk about a problem they have. You're coming in with your solution, knowing that this is a general problem across the population, across the corporate world. You're not necessarily targeting that specific person with their specific problem.
Correct. I mean, and with that said, and this is really sad and terrible, but when there was a woman from, a big consulting company, was it not Ernst and Young, but one of them, she was pushed on the subway into the tracks. Thank you, Deloitte. Like, I reached out to Deloitte. It may have been too soon, to be honest. And I didn't get booked yet, but I will keep following up with them because that is, I'm sure so many of their employees were feeling that terror.
Yeah,
after
I
that
feel
happened.
the terror when I go into the city. I mean, I still go, but I still feel, I do wonder if I'm ever coming back whenever I go in. And all right, so I want to jump to pricing. And again, we'll come back to questions. Like I already have a list of some questions coming in. We'll come back to all the questions, but I want to make sure we cover everything because Jen and I went over what we want to cover, and there's just so much. And let's just face it, everyone wants to know how you price this stuff. So let's just start with that.
My least favorite topic.
I know, but like, how do you price these things? Because I always tell people, and I believe this, that there is no best practice. There is no like standard market rate. There's no like you can price it, you can make up whatever price you want. There's no right or wrong. So how do you come up with your pricing for this stuff?
Yeah. I wish I had a really good answer for this. Intuitively, no. Let me really think about this. Okay, well, so speaking in person for so long, I started my first big, I think you asked me this, no, you asked me something else. The first big keynote that I had on a stage with 500 people was for Bacardi in 2017. And since then I was speaking a lot more than ever before, right? So it's really just been the last 5 years or so. So knowing what I was getting paid, on stages or to go speak, I just kind of panicked, to be honest, when the pandemic hit. Everything got canceled. I had zero income looking at 2020. And when I started to do my outreach, I got right back on the wagon. I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. I figured out Zoom, and I did decrease my rates because I didn't know what people would pay for Zoom sessions. So I was somewhere around the 2,000, 1,500. I was just like honestly playing around with numbers for like a good 6 months to a year. And then I was like, oh, okay, they'll pay this, raise it a bit more. They'll pay this, they'll pay this. And then also with the subject matter, again, this might be very different for everyone. My self-defense bucket, the perception of self-defense, like I said in the beginning, I really had to separate myself from the fitness community, from the wellness community, to really set myself up as an expert in this subject matter, to have companies pay thousands of dollars for the same session that I probably gave 10 years ago for $250. Does that make sense? So really, that was in my head. I had to work through that over and over and over again. So, and just increase those rates little by little by little over time.
What have you seen as far as though like a range? Like what, for people who are like, either I'm doing this for the first time, or I've been doing this and I want a gut check on what someone who makes a living doing this charges.
Sure. And again, it's so different. So for example, if an ERG, for example, that I just got hired to do my Burnout to Badass talk, they told me they bring in a speaker each month, right? So in my head, I'm like, okay, well, they're probably not paying $10,000 every single month. No one has a budget like that. No kind of ERG has a budget that can afford 10K a month. But if it's for, say, International Women's Day or a big event that a company is putting on, then their budget is probably going to be much bigger. So it's a lot of kind of thinking about those questions ahead of time, but also knowing like you should have what you absolutely will not get out of bed for. And everybody, that number is going to be different. And then you should have what you would love to make, what would make you like spring out of bed. And then, I accept gigs all in the middle because of what my goal is. So this is what I want to ask you right now. What is your goal for speaking? What is your goal for doing this? Why do you want to do all this outreach, do all this work? Because it is a lot of work and it's scary, obviously. Is it to build your platform? Is it to build your subscriber list? Is it to get new clients to sell a product or a service? Or is it just to make money or something else, right? So for me, when I started out in 2015, I would say, I started out on the college speaking circuit, maybe 2014, 2015. I always had this vision that pulled me. When I was in my early 20s, I went to see Tony Robbins speak. I know this is so corny and a lot of people can't stand him, but I love him. And I was like on the chairs, jumping up and down, like watching these big hands. And I was just like, oh my God, if I could have like this amount of impact, the amount of impact that he has on a crowd, like if I could do that for people, good Melanie, that would just light my soul. And that's what I wanted to do. So my goal for speaking is to become a world-class speaker. I am crystal clear on that. So therefore, that's my primary goal. And then obviously I have secondary goals. I want to make money because it's my primary source of income. I want to build the subscriber list and sell the book, etc. So for me, I will take unpaid speaking gigs. I will get in front of the audiences at a lower price point than some of you might. And that's all okay, because it just depends on what your major goal is.
Jen, how do you know when you should or shouldn't speak for free?
Good question. I wrote some notes. Because it is really important, right? So, well, just so everyone knows, like a lot of the big conferences, conventions, that kind of stuff do not pay. For example, I just said yes. So I'll take you through the process. Yesterday, I just accepted to speak at the NAR, not NRA, a National Association of Realtors conference, which is a yearly convention. I spoke there in 2018. They move it all around the country. And the realtor market is a huge niche for me because, right, it's mostly women. So you want to know the stats. It's 67% women are realtors. They get killed, they get attacked. They're, and they're pretty badass, right? They're kind of have that entrepreneurial spirit. So they are a big group for me. So one, I know who I'm getting in front of. Two, the audience. So it's not one company bringing me in where everyone works at the same company. It's one conference where I get on a stage and I get to speak in front of the New York board, the California board, the Oklahoma board, right? All these different boards that then would have the opportunity to bring me in to speak. So those type of conferences I will most likely say yes to. But then I said, okay, they picked one of my topics that they picked the Burnout to Badass, the wellness, because they really want to focus on wellness this year. And I was like, okay, well, I really don't see one of the boards bringing me to speak on wellness, to be honest, knowing that I've gotten booked so many other times for realtor safety. So I said, I asked instead of just saying yes or whatever, or no, I dug in a little and I asked the meeting organizer, conference organizer, planner, why didn't you choose my safety? And I'm really concerned because this is going to be an investment. This is all out of pocket to get myself to Orlando and blah, blah, blah. What else can I do around safety? Can I do something else? And she wrote right back and said, look, we had this other safety thing that we liked better. okay. But if you come in and do the wellness presentation, I'll let you lead facilitate a networking safety group, something like that. And then I said, okay, well, what about my book? She said, oh yeah, we'll get your book in the bookstore and we'll have you do a book signing. It's like, oh, okay. So now these are all different opportunities for me to network, get in front of people, sell my book, get lots of photos of people with my book, right? All the different things. So that's why I said yes to that.
What about ERGs though, Jen? Like, you know how much they irritate me.
I really don't do them for free. I will not, because they're in a corporation and corporations have money. If a conference doesn't pay speakers, they don't pay speakers, then it's up to you. But if a corporation is saying they don't have money for their ERGs, well, then find someone else. I'm very clear on that. The other reason so for example, over the pandemic, I did a free virtual gig for Ascend, which is an AAPI networking group that are nationwide because of all the racially motivated attacks. So I said, okay, well, this is like, it wasn't about what can I get out of this? It was like, I want to give back. So I did that and wound up getting paid gigs because, again, all the people work at different organizations. And I made really great connections. And so these are the perks that you can ask for is I asked for an attendee list. And then I had my VA go on LinkedIn and send every single person that attended, which was hundreds, a note and connected with them on LinkedIn. So profile, followers, and potential clients, right? What else can you leverage? Oh, stuff. Okay, so I was remembering this last night. I'm like, oh yeah, so when a company can't pay your full rate, say, I've negotiated 4 round trip business class tickets anywhere in the world for British Airways, which was awesome. 200,000 Hyatt points, 3 free nights at Ace Hotels. So that's another thing, like depending on what industries you like to speak to, I am a travel whore. I will speak for travel. Okay. Like anything in that realm, give it to me and I will, work with you and your organization. So is there products, is there services that you can kind of barter with as well? I also got some money along with that.
Okay. Really, really cool. Is there any, just to be clear, the times where you would speak to an ERG group for free is zero, because it's a club within a corporation. Corporations have money, you should be paid for your time, and there's no benefit for you because they're all employees. It's not like they all come from different companies that can bring you into their company. It's just not going to really generate much for you.
For me, however, if you're a coach and you want to fill your coaching programs, that might be a reason for you to do that. I've just leaned so far out of coaching and I don't want to do it anymore. One-to-one coaching that doesn't appeal to me, but it might for someone else.
Basically, lesson is, unless your customer is in the audience or someone who could potentially hire you, you would not speak for free or for any kind of reduced rate.
Correct.
Let's talk about, one thing I do want to touch on when it comes to keynotes, because we didn't touch on this. Someone actually asked me this in another group and I answered them privately, but the variables that go into pricing. So some of you know this because I spoke about this years ago, but I have a friend who used to be like a super, super high up person at Bank of America. And I kind of trapped her into a conversation when we were hiking one day and she had nowhere to go. And I was like, all right, I've got you captive here. I'm like, I'm going to ask you some questions and I want to know the honest truth. And I just asked her all about how she hires speakers, how much she pays speakers. And so this is where that's coming from. So we're coming from the HR level, executive level at Bank of America. Okay. So what she told me was, if people were coming in to speak to C-suite, that is a very different price point than 200 regular old employees. She said it's more, they pay a whole lot more for people to come in and speak to 10 C-suites than they do for 200 regular employees.
Mm.
So that was one thing. So depending on what executive level you're speaking to, you would charge differently based on who is in the audience. She said the other thing is, yes, it makes a difference whether it's ERG or they're hosting their annual leadership conference or retreat internally. Right. That pricing makes a big difference.
Right.
They're going to pay more for their retreats to fill those time slots. She also said that the minimum they pay for any speaker would be $5,000 for like a 1 hour speaking engagement. That's like what they kind of the baseline. And then for like C-suites, she said the minimum is $20,000. That's like kind of the baseline of what they pay. So if you're ever pitching, or if you're ever in a position where you're pricing a proposal for something like that, just don't go lower. If you're C-suite, if you're talking to C-suites, maybe not go lower than 20. Otherwise you're not going to get it, to be honest. If you watch Lena West's last expert session, she gave a great example of why pricing too low is actually going to make you lose the opportunity. And then if you're pricing for any kind of internal retreat or conference at a real company, a major company, don't go lower than 5 for sure. Yeah. So there's all sorts of variables. Is it
so many
people are in the audience? Is it 100 or is it 1,000? How many people? What's the structure? Whose department is it? What's the frequency? Is this a 6-part series where you're coming in once a month for 6 months, or is it a one-off thing? Like, there's so many different variables, but just giving you some hard numbers, everybody, just in case you want to know what Bank of America pays for speakers. That's what I'm benchmarking off of. And of course, if you are Barbara Corcoran coming in to speak, they said they brought in Brene Brown once, I think, and she's like, we paid like $50,000.
Wow.
Like if you're someone who's famous in the business world, yes, of course, it's going to be a really big speaking fee. Books help. Obviously, anytime you have a book, that is super helpful.
I will be raising my rates.
Yes, so you will be raising your rates, of course. It does. A lot of people think that when you write a book, you make a lot of money off the book. Typically, you don't make money on the book itself. You make money off of the opportunities that come from having written a book, because it just substantiates your expertise. Right. Let's go into how do you structure your actual keynote, because we've been asked that question a few times in the Upside, and I'd love to know your take on that.
Sure. I mean, there's many ways. So there's not just one way to structure a keynote. I can tell you how I structured mine. But I remember going to this in-person conference called World's Greatest Speaker by Brendan Burchard, maybe 5-ish years ago, kind of right before I developed the Art of Badassery keynote, because I didn't know how to do that, right? I mean, I had like the safety and self-defense ones, but essentially what stuck out for me was like, there are speakers that come and teach. There are speakers that entertain. And then if you can do a combination of both, you'll get booked for life. So that is something to just remember. Like, the entertainment part is obviously stories. So some people, again, the more you watch, the more you go to conferences and listen to other speakers, or even YouTube and just watch TED Talks and all that kind of stuff, you'll see that some people will tell one long story and interject the lessons. Some people will have lessons and interject the stories. That's kind of how I work. But essentially, you want to ask yourself how, with your audience, what do you want them to think? What do you want them to feel? And what do you want them to do after your talk? Answer those questions, right? Then you just start to outline. And that's how I would start to create a keynote. I would just, what are my main points to get them to think, feel, and do what I want them to think, feel, and do at the end? So my Art of Badassery is well, it wasn't even a book at first. It was just 5 different steps that people went through. Now the book is 7, but the keynote is 6, right? And it's almost like a journey that I walk the audience through, white belt to black belt. So at the end, everyone leaves with their black belt in badassery. But I tell stories, right? Or, examples of stories. And that was the most powerful thing, because before doing that Brendon Burchard workshop, I thought, my life's kind of like average. I don't have any big, you always hear these stories of someone like had this huge challenge to overcome, or failure, or almost died, right? And came back to life. Like, those are the most exciting motivational keynotes that I hear. And I'm like, I don't really have that. And then all of a sudden he threw us into a group and said, okay, like, tell your stories. And I was like, actually, yeah, I almost died on September 11th. Yeah, that's a story, right? And then I started to write it all out, and I saw how that led me to that, led me to that. And all of a sudden I had this arc of a story of my life that felt inspiring. And I could see, actually, right? It's not like I'm making it up or crafting it. I actually could see, going back to how that day changed the complete trajectory of my life. So you all have some version of that. You all have some type of story, again, depending on what your messaging is in your keynotes, but you want to share a bit about yourself. Otherwise, you're just teaching. And if you don't have stories about yourself, you have stories about your clients, or success stories or failure stories, or whatever it is, you have stories about other people. That's another technique that speakers will use, is just tell other people's stories, right, too. And I have one of those that I tell at Greenbelt, about finding your voice. And this woman who was attacked, and she had this battle cry, and it just gets everyone like laughing. And so I mean, that's a long way of saying that's how I structure my keynote. There are many ways. It just depends on what you want them to think, how you want them to feel, and what you want them to do afterwards.
Awesome. I love that structure. And I have, in all transparency, I have never done a keynote. I am actually like terrified, because I would need a teleprompter. I cannot memorize anything. So
you don't have to memorize. That's the good part.
Yeah,
especially if you're telling stories. That's the beauty. Like, it's your story. You know it. You don't have to memorize it. You're just up on stage telling a story. And that is like one of the best tricks ever.
Okay. Noted for all these times I'm asked to give keynotes. All right, so let's jump into some questions, okay? Rachel's asking about the kinds of budgets that ERGs have versus another arm of the company.
Yeah. Again, all over the place. $3,000, $7,000. Sometimes they'll say it'll come up in the, somehow in the conversation. So either someone's going to ask you, what's your rate? Or you can interject that and say, what's your budget? Right, first, and get an idea. And then if it sounds low, be like, well, my speaking rate is much higher than that. Or sometimes people have told me that it's higher than what I was going to ask for. So I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. So it's really, for me anyway, this may be unpopular opinion, especially with the Lena Wests of the upside. Like, I am still figuring that part out, because how do you know what their budget is? Unless you know a speaker that's spoken there before, you can directly ask somebody, you can look that up. If it's a warm connection, you can literally just ask them, what's the budget?
Yeah, I mean, with normal clients, I don't like saying what's the budget. I have a lot of reasons why. When it comes to speaking, I do think that's a little bit different, because they do tend to have very set budgets, right? I mean, there's there's not as much wiggle room to negotiate. They do have a range in mind. They do know what they
especially if you're dealing with a meeting planner. So meeting planners have the budget for the meeting or the event. And it's not like they could just go find an extra $10,000, right? So if it's a meeting planner, I've had really good conversations where they'll just like up and tell me like, this is what we set aside for the speaker.
I'm going to ask you a question, then I'm going to open my door for my dog. How much, Kimberly's asking, how much outreach do you do each week?
Loads. Some days I'll get in just in a rhythm of doing it for hours. So at least one, let me think realistically, every week is different, but if I can get a chunk of 2 hours each week at least to do outreach, and then throughout the week, I'm always following up and doing stuff like that. So a few hours a week. I have a separate Gmail account set up. That's jencassetta@gmail.com. So people know that I'm a speaker when I'm reaching out. And I checked the other day, I wrote it down in my sent inbox. So granted, this is only set up for a couple of years. There was 3,291 sent emails, and most of them, there's some of those are back and forth, but most of them are outreach. And that's only in the last couple of years. So I think about it like this, say when I'm doing, say, my realtor or college outreach, for every 100 emails that I send, I'll get like 8 or 9 or 10 responses, and I'll book 4-ish speaking gigs.
That's actually, I'm glad you said that, because I want people to understand, and those are actually normal. I could have predicted those numbers. So I always say it's a 10% response rate. You can expect about a 10% response rate. I would have said a 2 to 3% close rate. Yours is higher than most, probably because you've been doing this a really long time and you do it for a living. So for everybody else, expect a 10% response rate and about a 2% close rate, and of those 10%. And like that is what you can expect. And so anything more is plus plus. Anything less, you may want to adjust your approach, I would say.
Yeah, it's a numbers game. And you get ghosted by most people, even after like really good meetings. And that's what kills me. I'll have like an awesome Zoom meeting with Paramount. Like a couple months ago, they reached out to me, and I had already done like 4 sessions with Viacom CBS. They keep changing their leadership. That's why another thing that gets stuck and backed up in red tape is when leadership changes, budgets change and everything changes. And awesome Zoom, follow up, just like ghosts, not even like answer me and say, no, we can't do it or whatever. It's just like nothing, just part of the game.
That's good to know too for everybody, because we know you're a professional speaker, you do this for a living. So even Jen gets ghosted, and I always say everyone gets ghosted. It happens in the business. Sometimes you can still get a client out of it, and sometimes you just got to let it go. Let's do the next question, which is, did you start out by targeting women and ever expand from there? Yeah, that's the question. Did you start out by targeting women and then expand from there?
Yeah, I started out actually college women, specifically sorority women. It just felt like an easy, low-hanging fruit. And then so I started going to all colleges all around the country. And then I said, well, how can I elevate this a little more and get it in front of corporate women? But then, like I said, that first big one that I was at, Bacardi 2017, there were men in the audience, and they hired me too for their companies. So I got a lot of ongoing gigs from that one speaking gig.
Awesome. And then here's a question about approaching travel expenses. So let's say, their rate is aligned with your speaking fee. Great. Now, how do you then approach the conversation about covering travel expenses?
Yeah, plus travel. And then it's right. Like, so obviously airfare, I don't know what Lena's going to say about this. I don't fly first class. Right. I don't ask for that. But I make sure that I book all my own travel, because I'm super loyal to Delta. I get my upgrades. Most of the times I am flying first class because of my upgrades. I want to pick my hotel unless there's like a conference hotel that everyone's staying at, something like that. But for the most part, I book it all and then we'll get reimbursed.
But I've also seen many times where people either A, will say it must be a business class seat. And I have also seen where the company has already assumed that the person is going to get a business class seat. Like they've already assumed, well, if it's Jen Cassetta, like we know she's going to only fly business class, like, I mean, I always
hasn't happened to me yet.
well, I always say like, look, at some level, there is a tipping point where they will assume you're flying business class. And you usually know it after they know it. There's usually that inflection point. And I mean, when you think about it, if you were to hire Tony Robbins to speak, you would assume he's flying first.
Or his own plane.
Okay, maybe a little too much. If you were to hire someone a little more pedestrian, like Rachael Hollis, I would assume Rachael Hollis is flying first class. Do I know if she asked for that? I have no idea. I'm assuming Amy Porterfield flies first class. I'm assuming that because to me, she's a big name. Right. And so I would imagine she's flying first class. Does she? I have no idea. I don't know if she asked for that. But the point is, there is that you absolutely can ask for it, especially you could. And if you're a little bit nervous about it, you could even say, for travel more than 3 hours, I will also need a business class seat or something like that. I remember when in business, when we used to fly for business for our company, that was how it was set up. If you're flying further than 3 hours, you get to fly business class. That's just how it was. And it was always more than 3 hours, so it worked out. All right.
Well, I've had some conferences say like, this is your budget and you can't go out of it. I've had other people just ask. So again, it's kind of all over the place.
Yeah, I've also seen someone where it's like, this is your budget. And she like squeezed blood out of a rock and had her kids fly with her. Like she was like, oh, well, then I'm just going to fly economy at 6 a.m. and my family's coming too. So there you go. Carol's asking if you sell other stuff alongside your book. Like, do you sell any kind of like hats that say badassery or any kind of swag also?
Good question. Not at the moment. Honestly, this is all new to me with the book. So no. I have an online course for the self-defense. So I'll always plug that at the end of a safety session. But always I'm building my subscriber list. So at the end of every session, I have different handouts that correspond to each keynote, a QR code that people will take out, goes to a landing page, enter their email. And then from there, I can, if I have someone's email now, hopefully they don't unsubscribe and I'll be able to sell anything when it comes out. A lot of conferences also don't discourage selling from the stage.
They don't discourage, or they do.
Sorry, they discourage. They do not like it.
Yeah, well, I always look at it this way. If you're not going to pay me to speak, I'm going to sell something.
Sure.
And if you are paying me to speak, I might leave some business cards on the table. But if it's free, there has to be an exchange there. There has to be some sort of transaction, and otherwise it's not worth doing it. Charlene's asking, how did you know that it was time to increase your rates?
Listening to folks in the upside and speaking to a lot of friends that are in the business too. So Cara and I, Cara Richardson in the upside and I have been friends for a long time, and we're both speakers, and we will get on the phone every few weeks and just discuss like what we're pitching, how much, and just have someone to bounce that off of is really important. Now that I have the book, I know I can definitely charge more, and you just know when you start getting good, honestly. And I without sounding braggy, I hope, when I do the art of badassery, I literally pour my heart and soul into the people. It makes me cry, like thinking about it. And the response is so wonderful and amazing that I just know like, this is so valuable. This is helping women feel like so strong and confident and Like, this is worth a fuck ton of money.
Well, you know, it's a good upside expert session when there's tiers. So
Yeah.
that's how we measure our success.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that. Laura's asking, wouldn't a speaking fee for C-suite vary dependent upon the industry? So for example, wouldn't speaking vary if you were speaking to, say, C-suites in banking versus C-suites in travel? So that's the question. Do you think it varies depending on the industry? I have my own thought about that.
Well, why don't you answer? Because I'll think about it.
My answer is no. I think it's more dependent on the stage of the company. I think if you're speaking to a startup finance company, that's going to be very different than speaking at Bank of America. I think it, but travel industry is a gazillion-dollar industry too. You know, it's, to me,
Sure.
it's like once you're at the top, like if you're talking about C-suites, they all make, I mean, how much money do you think the CEO of, you know, American Airlines makes? I'm sure it's not that dissimilar than the CEO of Bank of America. I mean, I mean, when you're talking the difference between, you know, 20 million versus 50 million or 5 million versus 10, it's all, these are all the same people. This is all the same types of people, the same group, same echelon. That's my opinion.
I would agree. And, you know, to be transparent, my next stage is what I want to take this Art of Badassery to leadership retreats. And then I definitely would charge, I mean, way, way, way more, because it would be like a full day or a 2-day kind of retreat with leadership, obviously.
Yes. And just to reiterate, there is a lot of budget for corporate, not conference, but corporate retreats for their executives. They have a huge, huge budget for that. There is a ton of money to be made for those speaking engagements. Like I mentioned before, minimum 5,000. That's for like a regular old run-of-the-mill thing, but it goes up and up and up depending on who is in the audience. The higher the executive, the more you can charge. Let's get to the next question. Perfect timing. For cold outreach on LinkedIn, do you use the personalized invite as your outreach or a premium message?
I don't have the premium, so I just send a little note hoping that it's something that'll grab their attention. And then when they accept, obviously I'll send them a bigger note. But again,
I love that. I love that because it's like I keep telling people, like, just make it short and direct, like be very short and direct when you're reaching out to people. So I love that you don't even use premium. You just like send a short note in what will fit in that little amount that you get. That's perfect. I love that.
yeah.
Mickey's asking, in your experience, do ERGs not have budgets for speakers? I wrote a book on neurodiversity and have not clicked the paid speaker box just yet.
They are probably the majority that hire me. So yes, they do have budgets. Absolutely. It's been very rare that they've asked me, ERG has asked me to do something for free. Like I said, I wouldn't do it, but they all have money. If they want you to speak badly enough, they'll go get the money. That's happened lots of times where they're like, oh, that's not really what we have, you know, for this series or whatever they're doing. But if they really want it, they'll find it.
They'll find it. And Lori just put something in the chat, which I want to read because for anyone watching the recording, they won't have access to the chat. Lori wrote, when I worked for World 50, which is a peer-to-peer community for C-suite executives, they regularly paid big name speakers $250K plus.
World-class speaker.
World-class,
that's the goal.
big name speakers, which you are just right there, Jen. You're right on the cusp. Right on the cusp of a $250,000 speaking gig. You're almost there. No, but that just gives some perspective for sure. It gives a lot of perspective on what companies charge. I also want to mention, because it's important, that we have in the Upside a what people charge database. You have access, you can find that that link in Circle. You can find that link at the bottom of every Friday email. We have that link in there. It's a really valuable database. You can find it under resources, resources in Circle. It's one of our resources, and it's totally anonymous. People have put in their speaking fees, along with all different other project fees, but you can see what other people are charging for workshops, speaking, anything kind of that falls under this umbrella. It's all over the place. It is literally all over the place. But the point is that every single person here can achieve it. And there's no topic that's off limits. There's no topic that's not applicable. There's always an audience for this stuff. Jen, as we wrap up, I know some people are saying to themselves, well, how can I get more of Jen? How can I work with Jen? First of all, you also might be asking, where is Jen pointing people to when they want to know more? So I want to share with you Jennifer's speaking page. Oh, you know what? You can't link to that. Hold on 1 second.
Oops, sorry.
I messed up. Why is this not hyperlinking, Jen?
HTTP, sorry, yeah.
Okay, redo it so I can type it in, or you can just paste it in the chat. I'm sorry, everyone. Nobody wants to copy and paste. We want to hyperlink it. So, okay, so she's going to type in the actual link with HTTP. So you can see an example of what Jen's speaking page. Thank you, Jen. This is what Jen's speaking page looks like. So this is an excellent example of, I mean, she does this for a living. So this is not like she just made it all up all of a sudden. This is years and years of massaging and perfecting. So this is what a corporate speaking page looks like. Also, I know that some of you are going, well, I just want Jen to like tell me what to do. So Jen has put together a 75-minute, what she's calling a super session, which I love. I might steal that one day. A 75-minute super session where you can work one-on-one with her. You'll have the choice of working on your pitching strategy, your marketing materials, or refining your keynotes and workshops. So if you don't know where to begin, that's okay too. She's going to set you up with a plan of action. This is obviously a paid offering, but she's curated this just for all of you, for anyone who wants to work directly with her. She doesn't normally offer one-on-ones, as she mentioned earlier in the program, but I begged her to come up with some sort of one-on-one for anyone who does want to dive deeper with her. So this is only for Upside members, this one-on-one session. Don't go sharing this link with everybody in the world, because she is not going to do one-on-ones for other people, but she'll do it for all of you, for someone who really just wants Jen to do the work for them. So just do it for me. Tell me what to do, Jen. I get a lot of people saying that to me, Erin, just tell me what to do. I'm like, that is what the one-on-ones are for. I will tell you exactly what to do if you sign up for a one-on-one, because that's what they're for. So that's what that's for. Jen, any parting words as we wrap up the hour?
What keeps coming to mind just before we were wrapping up is regarding the pricing again, because I know it's really top of mind for a lot of people, is you really have to own it. And I had to work on that for so many years. It's inner work, obviously, to really be like, this is my value. And it's always a work in progress for me. So it's nice to think like, oh, I'll just throw out 25K. But if you are not aligned with that inner work style, then it's not going to come across as authentic. So you want to make sure that you're really authentic in your pricing and your keynotes and everything. So.
And unlike consulting, thank you for that, Jen. Unlike consulting, it is a lot easier to raise your rates each time in speaking than it is with consulting work. With consulting work, it is hard to dig yourself out of a low price hole. You want to really start as high as possible. With speaking, you can, and it is expected that people raise their speaking fees over the years. It's expected, it's normal, and it's much easier. So like Jen said, and like Lena said at her expert session, if you do not feel super confident and aligned spitting out that number, no pressure. You can start a little bit lower and raise your rates as you build and as you go. Jen, thank you for doing this. I really, really appreciate it. I know you have helped people over the years in the Upside with speaking, and now we are just going to point them to this expert session where you've basically divulged all of your trade secrets, and you've been so transparent and honest with everyone today. And just thank you. Thank you so much. This is recorded. It's going to be, the replay will be in our expert session space, along with the link to her corporate speaking page. So you can have that example, and along with the link to a one-on-one if you want to book a super session with Jen. Thanks, everyone. Thank you so much, Jen.
Thank you all. Thanks,
Bye,
Erin.
everyone. See ya.